I was away for a large chunk of last week. How's your week been? We haven't really had a chance to catch up in the interim.
It was. Are we on record at the moment?
We're on recording now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, not that there was anything that I can't repeat on record. It was it was fine.
You can because I can edit it, so it's fine.
Yeah. No, I was enjoying the sun. The season, keeps on going. It was a wee bit slower last week, so I quite enjoyed it. A bit of time to reflect on last season, look ahead to next season, and have a bit of a breather. And we did quite a lot of previewing to the Melrose Sevens towards the end of last week, and I was down there on Saturday, which was thoroughly enjoyable.
Now, how was that? Because I was away from Friday till yesterday, which is Tuesday, so we're recording Wednesday morning, and I completely missed everything that was going on at Melrose. So tell me all about it. Fill me in.
Yeah, it feels like it was a big success. I think the organisers were certainly very happy with how it went. A big crowd. I felt a bit sorry. No, I don't feel sorry because I don't think it bothered them either. The weather had been glorious all the way up to there, and it was glorious for the morning, were the first couple of hours, and then we had these kind of horrible rainstorms intermittently through the course of the day, which kind of dampens it a wee bit. But it wasn't so bad that it absolutely ruined it, I don't think. And I think everybody had a good enough time. And the rugby was good. I think it's in terms of the rugby what they were looking for. A couple of guest sides did well, but some of the homegrown, and that's been an ongoing debate, isn't it? That but Ayr, with a really athletic team, not necessarily sevens experts, but really big, strong guys that have been kind of stalwarts of Super Six, and then the Premiership winning side got to the semis. Melrose went all the way to the final, fell at the final hurdle to Shogun. Good day all round, actually. Good day all round.
So talk to me about the invitational sides, because you had with Shogun being there, did they have any big celebrity players, or were they just good athletes and good ringers?
Yeah, they kind of. It was funny because we did a preview. As part of our preview, we got various commentators and reporters who were going to be at the tournament to give their tips. And Shogun, despite being the reigning champions, kind of floated under the radar because, I think it was Will Hendy playing for them, who I think is a GB Sevens player. But I think there wasn't a lot of and that's probably the criticism they've had, that the guest sides are really strong, but it's not really showbiz necessarily, because they're kind of sevens. They're just not of that profile, so they kind of floated under the radar. But they were really strong, and they shouldn't have been the dark horses because they're reigning champions, and they were good enough for their win. I'm probably going to have to check here that Will Hendy was definitely in that team, but I think he was in one of the guest sides, which probably kind of sums it up that there's a wee bit. There is still a wee bit of a lack of identity to these teams. From the Melrose, from the average punter at Melrose Sevens, they're looking at it thinking, I don't really know these guys.
Yeah, I suppose it's different. Like that Glasgow Warriors team that won a few years ago with Iman Carlin Isles and Nico Matuvalu playing for them, and a few other kind of biggish names and well kent faces in that Glasgow team. So that's a big one for the crowd. And then you get in previous years, a side like Stellenbosch coming, where you don't know any of the players, but you know Stellenbosch. Whereas if you come in a kind of amorphous name like Shogun, and you're made up entirely of ringers, then it's harder to get behind that or get excited about that. But am I wrong? Are they ringers, or are they from a club? Who are they?
They're an invitational side that were but they play a lot of sevens. They play on the seven circuit, so no, they're not a club side. They are an invitational side. I think a lot of the guys play a lot of tournaments. I'm frantically trying to check. Ross McKnight was playing for them, and Archie Barber. Ross McKnight, who was in Glasgow Warriors Academy. He was captain, and he's been training with Edinburgh this year. He's a Stirling County guy. Archie Barber from Kelso got a chance. He was playing with them as well, and I was correct. Will Hendy was playing for them. So I'll be honest with you, I think they had something like 8 Spanish internationals playing for them. So that kind of gives an indication. Well, I don't know what it indicates, but
the Spanish sevens team is actually quite decent.
And so a lot of them had played on the Spanish on the circuit for Spain, not necessarily regulars. So it's. I think maybe we show our age as well, because we hark back to Randwick coming in the 80s or the 90s or whatever year it was, and
my first Melrose Sevens was watching like a Melrose team absolutely packed full of Scotland internationalists, and that was incredible to see.
Exactly, and those days are gone. But I think maybe people that are interested in sevens know who these people are, and I think, funnily enough, people like Robbie will know who they are because they know them from TikTok, and they know, they'll have a better idea. Maybe not know them name for name, but that's where Sevens is, things like Sevens is consumed more now because it doesn't get a profile on, the mainstream media, to use that phrase. So I think the people that grumble about the guest teams will continue to grumble, but I think it was a step in the right direction.
But it adds glamour to it because it's and it needs it because that's what separates it from the other Kings of the Sevens tournaments.
It does. But the point you make would be if, say it'd been Shogun and, the Edinburgh Rugby Academy, there'd probably be a bit of interest in that, but, Shogun or the Monaco Impies, for example, got to the final. I'm not sure many people would still be standing out there, given that the weather had been great watching the final, so you need a bit of both. And I think that's probably what people, the grumblers, want to kind of stress is that the club teams do make it. It's the club teams that bring the fans, really. The Shogun up,
of course.
I think it's probably about the right balance with, Melrose, Ayr getting to the semis, Edinburgh Academy, the Edinburgh Academy Rugby Academy side, getting to the quarters. Although they were the only Scottish teams that kind of progressed. Oh, and Breadalbane and Storm. We better not forget our friend Jamie Lindsay's Breadalbane and Storm side.
Indeed.
They got through to the quarters, and then lost to the Edinburgh Rugby Academy. So it was a good day all round. I did get I got a wee bit of a ticking off from Stuart Rutherford, the Edinburgh. He said
4.
Well, it wasn't really ticking off. Well, apparently I disgruntled a few of the Edinburgh Rugby Academy guys because Rory Brogan, who's been a kind of star player for Edinburgh Accies in the 7th Circuit, was man of the tournament and scored 9 tries at Jed when they won the week before, got pulled into the Edinburgh Rugby. Edinburgh haven't been involved in it, but they've decided, they were sending their academy team there, and they were short of a player, or they fancied a flyer, so they pulled them in. And I just kind of thought, that's a bit miserable, isn't it? You're the rugby, surely you can find someone. Good on Rory Brogan, and it's a great experience for him. So I totally understand why he took it up, and I don't think anybody.
Of course, he was never going to say no
exactly.
to that.
But I just thought it was a bit miserable. Like we're going to come and play at Melrose Sevens. We've got our own academy guys, and we'll have you because you were the best player last week from Edinburgh Accies. And the argument might be, we'll give it's a great experience for the guy, and it is. But you can give him experience elsewhere. And so Accies got knocked out in the first round. They might well have got through against London.
Golden Point to
Golden Point to
London Scottish.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they probably would have got through if they'd had Rory Brogan there. So I kind of we were running a live blog, and so I kind of had a bit of a grumble about this as I want to do. And then I called them in the team. I don't know why I'm laughing because it's not cool to laugh at your own sense of humour. But I called them the Edinburgh Rugby Academy Magpies in the rest of the live blog. And apparently they just thought it was a bit miserable of me, but it's not their fault. They asked him to play, and he said yes. So what's my problem with it? And the fundamental is they're right, but I just think it just kind of harks back a wee bit.
I think you are also allowed to criticise. That's your point.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think like great Edinburgh sending their academy side down to Melrose. I just thought it stank a wee bit of, and it's not the players' fault, but it stank a wee bit of, we're coming down and we'll have your best players because we're Edinburgh Rugby Academy. And, Rory Brogan's played really well for Accies, who've worked really hard to have a really good, after a tough 15 season, to have a really good...
They've had a great 7th season,
Yeah, it's a good 7th programme. And to nick their star player, for the big event, and they get knocked out in the first round just seemed a bit miserable to me. There must have been other guys they could have called up. But then that's the nature of it. You get rewarded. Young guys coming in playing rugby now, they want to get rewarded by getting recognition in the pro teams, getting a chance in the pro teams. So I don't blame Rory Brogan at all. I think it'd be better if they give him they got him in to train during the season and get him an A game or something. That might be that might be proper experience. But hey ho.
And I'm going to leapfrog onto another Sevens subject in a minute, but just tell me a bit about the off-field stuff at Melrose that went on around that. Like, obviously, we heard a lot about it on the pod last week. Did that all work well despite the rain? I imagine still the party tent was still kicking off and people getting in there because, especially with the rain, actually, all the better.
I think so. So I remember being really impressed last year. I went for a walk around the stadium, around the ground, midway through, and it was, I don't think it was great weather last year, but anyway, the tent was bouncing. There was a lot going on. And I thought that was great. So I did the same this year. and it was the party tent, and it was absolutely empty. But it turned out, I spoke to one of the security guys, and they'd emptied everybody out so they could tidy up for the big party after the tournament. So it was obviously it seemed like it was a matter of timing for me. So I didn't see how busy it was during. When I first walked around, I was like, "Oh God, there's nobody here at all. It's been a disaster." But I think so it was a matter of timing for me. But there was a lot of people there. I think they were up about 7,000. I think they thought they had, I think they were certainly, looking at the responses from some of the organisers and stuff on social media. They're all saying they're delighted with how it went, really pleased, and looking forward to planning for next year. So, I mean, they're bound to say that, aren't they? Really, but I think they were, generally getting the vibe you got was they were really pleased that it was, it was going really well. I bumped into our friend Jamie Lindsay.
How was he?
Yeah, he was in the hospitality. He was in fine form. He was in. He said slightly dusty. I texted him the next morning because I saw him towards the end of the day as well, and decided that he had a head start on me, so I would just go and get the train home rather than try and have another beer with him.
Catch up.
Yeah, and he said he was a bit dusty the next morning. I texted him to check he was okay, but he seemed to have a good time. Yeah, so it was good. I think it was just. I still think that it's got more potential as well. I think they could have more people in there. It's a day out in the borders. I got the train down for the first time ever.
Yes, and so that got mentioned last week's pod as well, that they were putting on
the extra trains. Extra
trains. Yeah, so that all worked well.
Yeah, it's perfect. And you jump off, and we had buses. Certainly on the way down, they had buses shuttling people there. I just walked it, and it's maybe about a 40-minute walk, but fairly pleasant.
Nice.
And, fairly pleasant. And I walked back. My colleague Graham Bean from the Scotsman, he missed the 10:15 train. I had to get the last train, and I think he was on with the
Venga train.
The Venga train. So I don't think. I mean, Graham's a kind-hearted guy, so I think he kind of enjoyed that these people are having a nice time. But I think he could have done with a seat and a bit of peace and quiet. So.
Yes, I can only begin to imagine the carnage on that train.
Yeah, exactly.
Bet it was great fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So good on Melrose Sevens, the guys that have organised it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so from that high, we'll now jump to the news that's come out that Team GB's men and women's full-time sevens program is going to be scrapped at the end of July.
Yeah,
and the players are going to be on pay-to-play contracts for whatever tournaments they're selected for, and essentially it's because the whole program just costs too much, and it's just a loss maker every year. And it's just interesting to see how that whole series has declined over the years, because I remember in the early 2000s, and again, this is, you and I harking back to
back in the day,
a period which is even then, it wasn't a golden period then, but it was certainly better than it is now, where, I mean, maybe it's partly because at the time we were both playing rugby and we knew guys on the seven circuits. You would get up to watch, the Sydney Sevens to see some of your pals playing and seeing how they're doing.
Yeah.
But that whole circuit of Wellington, Singapore, Hong Kong, they had Sydney, they had Cape Town, and they had Vegas and /LA, and they have Vancouver or something as well, maybe. And then they had Twickenham, and we obviously had a leg for a period, and it just seemed it was never packed. But it was a healthy competition. And, Wellington was obviously always famed for being like a real party event that I think got a bit out of hand at times. And, Twickenham, Scotland won there, which is absolutely one of the most incredible seven stories. Yeah. And the way it was done in this dramatic final play to beat South Africa, was it?
I think it was South Africa that beat in the final.
Or New Zealand?
They became, was it the final? I think it was South Africa in the final, but they became the first Scottish men's team to beat, or Scottish
New Zealand
team to beat New Zealand. I can't remember if it was the...
That's terrible. I can't remember, because I can remember the play. It was Scott White, who's been our guest on this pod, doing a short kickoff to himself. Yeah. And they went through the phases, and it's Dougie Fife scored the winner. Absolutely sensational finish to the tournament to win it. But anyway, the whole thing just seemed big and vibrant and growing, and then it becomes an Olympic sport, and you think it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And there was quite a lot of disquiet when the individual unions got amalgamated into the Team GB, and obviously Ireland were have their own team, and it's just all collapsing now. Ireland have done the same thing where they have ditched they've kept the women's team as a pro team, but that's because you can understand the thinking behind that, because there's no other professional outlet for their players in Ireland. Whereas in the UK, not in Wales, so although they do have the Celtic Challenge teams, but I don't actually know how the finances work for that in Wales. Whereas obviously we have Edinburgh and Glasgow up here, and then there's the whole English Premiership, which is professional or semi-professional. And the point being, I just don't know where it goes from here, because it seems to just be sliding. Team GB didn't qualify for the last Olympics, which was pretty outrageous, especially when you look at the teams that did make it in. It's like a gross feeling that they've gone from being finalists in Rio to not qualifying for the last one. And I just don't know. I don't know where it goes from here, but it's a kind of sad indictment that everyone is just kind of closing shop now on sevens. Yeah, absolutely. It feels a wee bit, the rugby generally has big financial problems, isn't it? And sevens is paying the price for that. Now, the argument would be, if you don't cover your costs, then that's life. But I find it quite sad, because it just feels like, because as the belts tighten and we get, cash is more and more a concern, we're just focusing in more and more and more on rugby as a certain thing, which is, the academy structure, the pro game, and like there's. The sevens is fun, it's just got very homogenous. The whole thing, rugby's just getting more and more homogenous, because our horizons are narrowing, because we're so desperate just to keep the core of the game on the road, the pro game. The people running the game are trying so desperate just to keep the pro game and the international game, which is their bread and butter, on the road, that the potential of sevens hasn't really. I think it's not been realised at all. I think it's So it's a very strange decision, isn't it, to go, if you're trying to grow the game. And you make this decision to go Team GB rather than allowing each country to develop their own players and a wider pool of players. I think, because one of the arguments is, it's not working as a development tool anymore of guys coming from sevens and women from sevens into the 15s game. But how can they if they've got such a tiny pool of players? Because they've only got one team rather than four now. Yeah, well, you look at it. I mean, Darcy Graham was going to make it anyway, because what he does and what the kind of player he is, the kind of guy he is. But when he came out in the under-20s, they didn't really know what to do with him. And, he ended up going off and playing a bit on the sevens. And undoubtedly, I do not believe that it didn't help him. And George Horn, similar. It took a while for him to come through. And, that's concern. See, I disagree. I don't think anyone's guaranteed to make it. Yeah. So this is all part of their development. Yeah. Learning one-on-one tackling, just different things. Like, I think how good Darcy is at jackling. Yeah. There's no doubt he must have developed an element of that. Yeah. You can't say it's all come from that. No, I wouldn't argue. Professional rugby player, but I wouldn't argue with you. Things like that. Yeah. I mean, I think what it meant was Darcy was a special talent anyway. But he went, and absolutely, in his game. But there's many special talents have not gone on to make it. And so I worry, it's the George Horns and the Darcy Grahams, when they come out, is there a path for the wee guy now? If, because where do you get that chance to kind of, prove yourself and develop the bits of the game that you're never going to do in the 15s, because you're a tiny wee winger that, isn't trusted to do that kind of. And I just think... It goes back to we're just focusing in on creating, the academy structures. We always talk about there being a bottleneck of, for talent. So say, for example, last year when Buffele was fit and Duhan and Darcy were fit and Wes Goosen was playing, you're thinking Harry Patterson could have well done with, rather than playing the odd game for Heriots or Ackies or whoever, actually farm him out to the sevens for a couple of tournaments. Yeah. And that would be brilliant for his development. Yeah, absolutely. And don't have that. Yeah. And in fairness, we're not losing that now at this point. We lost that when it went from Scotland to GB. That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, it was a madness that we did that. I mean, you look at the programme last... And then you don't qualify for the Olympics. Yeah. You go, well, what was the point of it altogether? Yeah. And you look at that programme last year. I mean, we had a really good interview with... I can say that because it was Ian Morrison that did the interview with Calum Barreto, who was captain of the GB7 squad last year, but he was involved in the team that didn't make it. And it was before they didn't make the Olympics, but Ian Morrison spoke to him about, he was quite outspoken, but just very honest about how the limitations of that GB series, that GB's programme. And it was basically
the guys on the core contracts were at home, they trained at home, did all their stuff at home, and then they kind of flew in, had a couple of sessions and played their sevens, and then they went back home. So it wasn't really, and he was saying, people look at it from the outside and they say you've got three rich nations or three traditional big superpower nations. How are they struggling to get to the Olympics? And he was saying it's surprising that we're this close given how underprepared we are. So the programme wasn't running that well. And from a Scottish perspective last year, the core squad, you had Callum was the captain of it, and I might be wrong about this, and Matt Davidson, and they were the only two Scots in the core squad. So really, it wasn't serving a function for Scotland. And the question would be, is this the moment where Scotland although David Nucifora was involved in setting up the Irish sevens programme, and we quoted him on Facebook last week. He was very outspoken on a Facebook thread that had been from one of the former Irish squad members about how bad a decision it was for the Irish to get rid of it, and how is it World Rugby don't deserve the sevens. Somebody needs to look after it properly. He was a bit more circumspect when he was quoted in the press release that they had for the British Lion, the British thing being disbanded. But the point I've kind of got a point here. But the point is, David Nucifora has a history of being interested in the sevens. Whether he is now or not, who knows? Especially with the financial pressures that are facing Scottish rugby. But is this a chance for Scotland to come back in and say, right, Britain doesn't want to run it. We're going to run it because we think it can do something for our the next Darcy Grahams and the next George Horns. And not just those guys. There's lots of other guys. I mean, I think they're the two really good examples because I think they really did benefit. But there's loads of guys benefit from it. So it'd be a really bold move, and I'd like to see it, but I don't hold my breath.
Yeah, I mean, and a man that we very, very, very rarely talk about on this pod, but Stuart Hogg had a career renaissance from having been down in the dumps when he tried to move from Glasgow to Ulster, got dropped for the semi-final and final of the Pro 12, and then he went to the Commonwealth Games with Scotland, and that totally reignited his career.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you think, the way it's worked out with the Commonwealth Games, sevens isn't featuring in the next one in Glasgow because they've had to do a massively reduced programme because it's been rescued from Brisbane.
Yeah.
Was it Brisbane? It was meant to have it, and then they decided...
Melbourne, wasn't it? Melbourne?
Melbourne, yeah. They decided to ditch it.
Yeah.
And then Glasgow took up the mantle, but they've had to do, as I say, a hugely reduced programme, and sevens hasn't made it. So it's not like they can build a Scotland team to compete in that next year. But you've got a 5-year cycle now to look to have a Commonwealth Games team. And I just think it may not make money, but it's we've only got 2 pro teams. I think it's an important gauge. You could put Freddie Douglas been playing sevens.
Yeah.
If he's not playing for Edinburgh, get him out on. Again, just like how good would that be for his development to be doing that?
Yeah. And in terms of and you can growing the game, sevens is a great thing to watch. It's something a bit different. It's something that I think. Rugby's good to watch, and I just think it's easier to organise, it's easier to manage. It's maybe not a tournament, maybe not a whole tournament, but you only need 7 players to get a team out. So there's loads of potential. It's a huge marketing tool for Scottish rugby, for World Rugby that they've passed up. And I was just thinking when you were talking there, Mark Bennett, when he went back and played in the Olympics. Now, Mark Bennett came to the launch of that Porto Youth Rugby Academy thing that I'm involved in, and he helped. It was brilliant. He did a coaching course with the boys, a 6-week block, which was brilliant. But when he was at the launch, you introduce him and you say Mark Bennett, Olympic medalist, and straight away they're all going, wow, that's like that means something to them, and why would we want to try and plug into that? I don't know.
I just think, especially for Scotland, where we are never going to have a team that is able to overpower others. So it's all about speed and skill and having 15 rugby players, because we're not going to have a monstrous 8 who can just scrummage and maul and carry hard. So why not get your back 5 of the scrum and all your backs, if they're coming through the system, getting a bit of a taste of sevens, just to work on distribution of both hands, appreciation of space, beating men one-on-one, tackling one-on-one, all this kind of jackling, all this kind of stuff and the pressure of playing in a huge stadium with an enormous amount of space that you have to cover. I mean, just the idea of it just makes me want to throw up because it's just terrifying. But that is just incredible for their development.
Yeah.
And then you have one or two guys who are just, the Colin Gregors of the world, Andrew Turnbulls of the world, who just are on the circuit as the permanent sevens guy and guides these new guys coming in on how to play sevens and how to manage all these things and how to be a professional from one tournament to the next.
Yeah.
And you're also going to have a bit of fun. So if you get knocked out in the first day in Las Vegas, then, well, you got the second day and you're not flying till Tuesday. So you can have a bit of fun in your professional career as well.
Yeah. That's maybe not a selling point in terms of when you're trying to...
Oh, no, but it is, because it's all part of the bonding.
Yeah.
And then that
it's good for the
better...
Yeah.
It's a bit better, but you got a better squad atmosphere and team and connections for the next tournament.
Yeah.
I think I really do believe that is important.
Yeah. I think there's a point there that professional rugby is less and less. It feels to me like we just keep on, like we get more and more serious all the time. Where's the fun? Sevens should be fun, and if it's not making money, then let's work out how we make it better so it is fun, because it's a great concept. There's no doubt it's a good concept. That's my view. If it's not working for you as a commercial tool or a commercial, then it's because you've not worked out how to sell that better. Because I don't believe it's just fundamental, and maybe you have to restructure the World Series so that there's not quite as much flying, travel involved. I don't know if that's the way you do it. I don't know, but it feels to me like, going back to what I said at the very beginning, which is World Rugby, the top nations, the top unions, the top clubs, everybody's feeling the pinch. Everyone's feeling a wee bit hard up, and because of that, they're cutting away around the edges, and it's just more and more focused on what's important to them, which is, churning out players to play serious 15s rugby, at the sharp end of the pro game and the rest of it. And the problem with that, and that's fine, but the problem with that is if you keep on trimming away at the bottom to feed the top, then, your base gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you end up with ultimately a smaller sport. Maybe the top of the pyramid's strong, but what's feeding into it? So
yeah, totally. Which leads us very nicely into the announcement of the Club World Cup.
Yeah.
So it's going to take place every 4 years.
Yeah.
In between World Cups and Lions tours.
Yeah.
And it's going to replace in Europe the quarterfinals onwards. So once you qualify out of your, presumably they keep the same ladders they have now and they don't revert to pools, which I think quite a lot of people will quite like, that reversion to pools, because the early part of the Champions Cup is just such a bizarre free-for-all, and some teams can qualify for the last 16 without actually winning a game, and others can win a couple of games and not qualify. It's all kind of weird. So that will replace the quarterfinals, and it will then become a Club World. So your Club World Cup, where you've got your teams from Europe, Super Rugby teams, and one from Japan. And it's going to be played in a single venue in a destination currently unnamed, but it could be anything from Dubai to LA to, I'm sure, probably more likely, somewhere like Saudi. It's got all the money and want to sport wash because of their terrible human rights history. So,
you tell me.
Yes. What do you make of that, Barney?
Guess what I make of it, Pete. What do you think? What do you think I think?
I think you're not relishing this prospect.
No, I'm not really. Similar, I wasn't that convinced by the Nations Cup. This for starters, this destination finale. I mean, how many people really are going to go, around the world to spend several weeks watching their team? Not that many. So then it's just going to be neutrals, and I just don't see filling huge stadiums with So I think as a spectacle, they're looking for a made-for-TV enterprise, which is fine, but it's not really kind of heart and soul rugby, is it? Probably playing in empty-ish stadiums. I don't think it shows a lot of faith in the Champions Cup that every fourth year you just knock it on the head.
Yeah,
because
it's such a weird thing, like the constant need to find a club world champion. So you have your champions of Europe and you have your champions of Super Rugby, and it's like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if they played each other? Well, just organise a one-off game if you're really that desperate for it. You don't have to massacre the tournaments. And at the moment, the URC and the Premiership finish in the same weekend, but the top 14, as we know from the issues with the Lions Tour, goes on for another 3-4 weeks. So they've got to somehow make a compromise to shorten their season or condense their season, which is actually, they're the only entity actually making any money. Is the top 14 in the Pro D2. And I cannot, and for that reason alone, I can't see this lasting more than 1 or 2 cycles.
No. It just seems a bit of a desperate grab to me. We need to make more money, and it's similar but different from what I was saying about the sevens. Is you've not made it work. Like doing more. It's kind of contradicting myself actually, but doing more. Just bringing more games in. It just doesn't seem to. I don't really see that it's a solution. I just don't see it. It is that I agree with you. The Champions Cup winner and the Super Rugby winner face off, or the top 2 in a round robin. Brilliant. That'd be great. But are people really that interested in waiting? All these games to get to find out. To see the Crusaders play Bath. One-off game. It's interesting. I would watch it, but it's not. I just think,
and it's one of these things. They're almost aligned time-wise.
Yeah.
And especially if we'd actually gone back in time to, if it hadn't been for the power of the top 14, where you could actually, where they want their final to be the conclusion to the season, whereas it used to be Europe. But if you could somehow convince them to allow that Champions Cup final to be after the top 14 final as the culmination of the season and the big prize, that would then coincide time-wise now with the conclusion of Super Rugby. So it's not like, if we did it this year, there'd be like a 6-week, or maybe not as many 6 weeks, 4-week break between the Champions Cup final and the Super Rugby final to then play the winner of each. Whereas if you put Champions Cup at the end, then they pretty much finish around the same time, and then it would make sense to have a one-off final to see who is the club champion. But it's like the FIFA one. Who cares?
Yeah. That's a good example.
Apart from the fans of those respective clubs.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you who the current club football FIFA club world champion is.
No.
Who gives a shit?
Yeah,
Nobody.
No. In fairness, I don't think you and me are the prime people to know.
But it's the world's biggest sport. I can tell you who the champions, the European champions are from the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Same with the Premiership.
It just seems like,
who cares?
It feels a bit grasping, isn't it? We need more money. We'll do this. We'll do that. We've said it before. All of this, the more you introduce, the more you dilute, like the really big days. There can only be a certain number of, you can only get excited so many times in a 4-year cycle. So, already you wonder what's going to happen with the Lions when they go to South Africa. Is it going to be that exciting given that, 3 of the 4 competing nations play against them every week, and the other nation, 4 or 5 times a year in the Champions Cup? If we diluted the Lions by, letting them get the South African, trying to kind of get that, the South African dollar in here, probably, maybe they had to do it. So now you create this you create this new tournament, and that kind of, it just means that there's just more crossover, which means that the big events don't have the same sort of prestige or the same sort of sense of occasion. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And we touched on this before, months ago, about seasonal structures and the future of the game, where New Zealand and South Africa have gone back in time to move forward, where they're reintroducing tours to each other's countries, because there is a uniqueness now to that, because they're only playing each other in the Rugby Championship. There's no Super Rugby crossover, and there's something now mystical about going on tour to these countries, as it is with the Lions. But like, just this globalization of the game robs the magic from these rare fixtures when they come up. It's like this whole thing with the Nations League thing. I'm just the requirement for there to be some kind of league meaning to the autumn is just beyond me, because they're, that's the 150 years of Test rugby. It's just about one-off games, really. And yes, it's from a commercial point of view, the Six Nations is amazing, but who doesn't love a one-off game against the All Blacks? Yeah. And we've never done it, but should we win, who gives a shit about league points?
Absolutely.
It's about that fixture and that win and that moment. Ireland's win over the All Blacks at Soldier Field in Chicago.
Yeah, that was great.
It was the first time ever, and it was irrelevant that it wasn't part of a tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's this moment in history.
Absolutely. Robert Kitson did quite a good piece along those lines in the Guardian. I don't know if you saw that. He spoke about that. See it, no. And he just spoke about how. Basically the tradition, the Champions Cup doesn't have the same level of history as the Six Nations, obviously, but it's not maybe the tournament that we all remember before they kind of messed about with the structure. But just talking about how it's important, and that's your brand, you're diluting the brand. It's quite a good piece, so people should maybe have a read of that if they fancy it. I was just going to jump in as well because we're talking about where the host nations, the guys in the Times who broke the story. Did you hear? It was great. Did you listen to the Ruck podcast today? Alex?
No, not today.
I think it was on Monday. Alex Lowe talking about that. I'll talk about that in a second. How he broke the story, but in the Times they reported it is understood the first two editions of the global tournament. So this is us back talking about this Club World Championship in 2020 and 2032 would be held in Europe. The intention is to take the knockout games to a destination venue such as Barcelona. But I'm pretty sure, I agree with you, pretty sure soon after that they'll be off to Saudi or wherever it is. It's worth also pointing out that, it's 16 teams in it, so the split is 8 from the Champions Cup, the top 8 are in the quarterfinals, 7 from Super Rugby, and I guess team from Japan. Now, so you're looking at that, like 7 teams from Super Rugby, that's a big proportion of their,
it's massive,
and then, you're running the risk of, there's a real possibility that an English team might not make it. There might not be any English teams in it one year. You think, well, that's a bit of a disaster. I would have thought. I think that would be unlikely, but it's not impossible. It's by no means. So it just seems a wee bit of a mishmash to me. Going back to it, so on the Ruck podcast, the guys were talking about it, and Will Kelleher was off last week. I think it was last Friday. So Will Kelleher was away, a weekend away with his wife or his girlfriend, partner, and he'd obviously got wind, whoever his source is, that they were going. There's been talk about this, and they were going to announce it. There'd been a board meeting, and it had been approved at the board meeting. And Dominic Mackay was doing a briefing that afternoon, at which was presumably it was going to come up. So Alex Lowe was covering that day. So he sent a text message to Alex saying, "This is what's happened. You better be, just so you can be across it." So Alex Lowe had been stuck on a train to get to Cardiff, where they were having, before the pre-tournament. Dominic Mackay, who's the chair of EPCR briefing, and he didn't make it in time. There was all sorts of problems with the travel, and he assumed that everybody else was writing the story, so he managed to write the story and get it online, without being there, because he was obviously confident in Will Kelleher's source, and he did it on his phone, and it was posted online, and they broke the story, but he thought he'd just written the story as everybody else would be writing it because it had been spoken about at the briefing. And so apparently he got to the briefing afterwards, and some of the English journals who were there and said, asked Dominic about this, and Dominic had kind of not backpedaled, but kind of danced around it and said, "Oh no, there's nothing really decided yet." Basically told a bit of a porky, and said it wasn't true at all. And so he'd ended up with this exclusive, and it was true, obviously. But Dominic had, and so I just thought it was quite funny that Alex Lowe had broken a story by accident on his phone. So
that's going to get him the Rugby Writer of the Year next year.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. exclusive of the year. Yeah. But it does show as well, also, media management, don't tell fibs, because you end up with egg on your face. It was a famous, I think it might be apocryphal, there was a theatre reviewist who was notorious for skiving. He just made it up, and he'd gone out for dinner instead of going to a show. And he'd written this review slating it, about how bad the show was. It turned out the theatre, this was back in the 1920s, the theatre had burned down the night before. I'm going to look that up. That's a famous story. Well, anyway, I digress.
Talking about Alex Lowe on the way to Cardiff, then let's touch on those games. So I was flying Friday night, and I didn't see the Bath game live, but when I landed, I got the last 35 minutes on the radio, which I was listening to. And it was quite funny. So I was texting Rob Robertson afterwards just about the game. And because I landed and I got a text from him saying, "Oh, that's definitely a red," referring to Sam Underhill's yellow card that he got for what I've subsequently seen an absolutely minging high shot on. And I said, like, how did Finn play? Because Sarah Orchard on the radio was just as I tuned in, and they were still early in the second half, she's like, "Oh, Finn Russell, he is not having a good game tonight. It should be said." And then Alex Cuthbert, who was his co-host, said, "Well, I think he's controlling the game quite well. This is cup rugby. He's putting the team in the right place and controlling things." But then subsequently, everything I've read and every comment I've seen has been that Finn played very well, and I've not watched the full game. I've only watched the highlights, so it's hard to judge from that. But what was your take on him? Because I was surprised by her. I mean, she's always been quite negative towards him, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I was going to use the word low key, but I wouldn't say it was low key. But I just think there wasn't, necessarily the many Finn moments, the kind of absolutely, sensational passes.
It's hilarious. I find it hilarious that it sounds like he played much as he did in the semi-final against Edinburgh, where he just controlled territory, did nothing flash, and played great cup rugby, kicked his goals, and put his team in the right place, which is something that every critic of his for years has said that he is incapable of doing, and then suddenly he plays like that and he's having a bad game.
Yeah.
Is that a fair...
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, I think...
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Bath were in control. They needed to, the Finn did what he needed to do. They won the game. Just like, I don't know what else
if he pulled all the rabbits out of the hat, they'd be saying this is not how you play a Lions Test series. You need a controlling 10 who lets his forwards do the work against the Aussies and nothing too flash and controls things. It drives me mad that people can't see that he is capable of both.
Yeah. Yeah, and he plays the way he plays for Scotland a lot because we are underpowered up front quite often, or we need a moment of magic. If you don't need a moment of magic, he's shown. And I think, and in fairness, there was times. I think back to that European Cup final for Racing when he did have a bit of a kind of, let's call it an up and down game. And he maybe did kind of push it there when he didn't need to. But I don't know what you can say about that. He did, they won, and he had them playing the right areas of the park, had them playing to their strengths. Game over, they left the trophy, and it clearly meant a lot to them. It's interesting because the Challenge Cup's always looked upon as a wee bit of a,
It's hilarious. Again, hilarious how the take on this has been like, this is a major trophy. This is like brilliant for Bath. They're on their way to the treble. It's like, well, they've won the Prem Cup and they've won the second tier tournament, which has been never celebrated at all. When Gloucester beat Edinburgh a few years ago, was it lauded much? When nobody ever talks about this one. When Toulon won it against Glasgow, it was still very much with an asterisk of, well, it's not the big one, is it?
No, exactly.
But it seems okay for Bath to,
Yeah, good for them.
I'm thrilled for him that he is, he has a trophy, and good for them. And it's always difficult when a team who played nice rugby and are top of the log all season then trip at the last hurdle, and you just hope that they, Clermont did that forever, and you just wish they'd actually had delivered on something. And in fairness, actually, they did win the Challenge Cup, and Benjamin Kaiser, the hooker, still talks about how incredible that was for the club, the players, and the town, because they had finally won something, but they'd had so many years of just being incredibly dominant and then just slipping at the last hurdle.
Yeah.
And you just hope Bath can push on. Again, no injuries to any key players, especially for the Lions. And they go, probably rest everyone this week, and then they go semi-final, win, final, just do the job, get the trophy that you deserve.
Here's hoping. Yeah.
And Saturday.
Yeah, I think we better not talk too much about that because I didn't see much of it either. I was at Melrose Sevens. I watched the highlights. You were right. Credit to Burn. You always blow smoke up my ass and say that I'm the one that's better.
No, you are normally right, but I was pleased that I was correct this time.
Watching the highlights and reading about it afterwards, I just think, as you suggested, Barrett's just had too much power in the end, and Northampton clearly...
Bordeaux.
Yeah, what did I say? Did I say Barrett's? Oh, yeah, I was really thinking about how Barrett's...
Again, another great club who failed to win stuff in the past.
Yeah, exactly, Bordeaux. Yeah, so good on them. Nothing to add.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, it was a shame Johnny Degrade wasn't involved. Rory Hutchison was, and, didn't didn't happen for them. But I think they're deserving winners. You can't deny that they've been just unbelievable this year.
Yeah, Northampton clearly had a bit of bad luck as well. I mean, they started well, scoring a try, losing 2 players in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, a couple of disallowed ones for Henry Pollock.
Yeah.
It was interesting, especially the second one where there was a tug back on I can't remember his name, Tamifuna, the prop, which opened the gap at the front of the line out, which Pollock then scored from. There's lots of criticisms of the TMO interfering too much, and in the past that kind of skullduggery you'd have got away with it, and they'd have scored the try. And interesting, but I'm actually glad stuff like that gets picked up and pulled back.
Yeah,
because there's a difference between gamesmanship and the spirit of the game, and that kind of thing has always pissed me off. When a bit of blatant cheating, which normally gets missed in Scotland's case, when it happens to us, but I was pleased that kind of thing did get picked up.
Yeah.
But I still think Sam Underhill should have been red carded.
Yeah, it's a hard one to understand. I mean, it's interesting because Holly Davidson carded him earlier on in the tournament, didn't she? Red carded him, and it went to the TMO. Yeah,
they're just obviously who knows what kind of instructions they get, but you just must be so aware, don't ruin the final. With a red card.
Yeah,
Find some mitigation. So.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a bad one though. It was a really bad one.
He got 4 weeks now, isn't he? He's been banned for 4 weeks.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So that's them obviously missing the rest of the Prem run-in, which is tough going for Bath to lose one of their best players, but opens the door. I suppose from a Scottish point of view, definitely opens the door for Josh Bayliss having good involvement over the next few weeks.
Yeah. I'm just having a look at what Underhill will be unavailable for Bath's match against Saracens on Saturday, as well as the Premiership semi-final on Friday, 6th of June. He'll be unavailable if the club reaches the Premiership final at Twickenham on the 14th. They just didn't want to assume that he's going to make it that far.
Yeah.
And he'll miss, if selected for England this summer, would also be unavailable to face France on the 21st of June. Or they could do what they did with Henko and pretend that he was going to play for Bath under 14s in a game.
Yes. They'll hastily involve some warm-up games and count them in for them.
Yeah. Anyway, right.
So this weekend we can get on to Edinburgh and Glasgow. So we've got the URC quarterfinals coming up, and Friday night we've got Glasgow against the Stormers, and Glasgow welcome back Jack Mann, Henko Venter and Sam Talakai back into the squad for selection availability. And then Saturday lunchtime we've got the Bulls versus Edinburgh in Pretoria, and they hoping to have Duhan back fit for that one. How do we see those going? I think I can guess, but
I think Warriors will beat Stormers. Probably not as confident as I would have been 4 or 5 weeks ago, but they've got guys coming back at the right time. They've had a week of a breather. I think they needed a bit of a breather, and the home advantage. So Glasgow scraped past the Stormers. And a valiant but ultimately unsuccessful effort from Edinburgh in Pretoria at Loftus Vesterfield. What do you think?
I agree. Yeah. And again, just no injuries, please, lads. Just everyone stay nice and fit and healthy, and just let the cards fall where they may in terms of the results. But I think that's how it will go. Yeah.
So interesting.
Good preview. Great preview. But yeah. So. I mean, there's nothing more to say, to be honest. The teams aren't out yet, so we actually can't say much more. But I think that is probably, looking at it from this far out, that is, I think, a very fair assessment of how those games will go.
It's kind of where we're at in the season, isn't it? It's like, we're now in the kind of, it's just do or die time. There's not really anything left to say. We know all about Glasgow. We know all about Edinburgh. And it's just time to... and the whole seasons could swing. It's possible the whole thing could swing on its head, and Edinburgh get over the line against the Bulls, having they beat the
because they're an upward curve.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. Yeah, and Glasgow could fall short. I mean, there's definitely some intrigue in there, which you might not have said a couple. Well, certainly, I don't think you'd ever rule out the Stormers in a quarter final, but I think Edinburgh at the Bulls 2 months ago you'd have said.
Yeah, no chance.
Yeah.
Well, we will be back next week, and we will pick apart those quarterfinals. And until then, Barney, enjoy the rugby. Well, actually, what games are you going to the Glasgow one? Presumably,
I'm planning to be in Glasgow on Friday night, and I'm not getting all the way to South Africa, so I'll be watching that from the comfort of my sofa.
For God's sake, will somebody please pour some major sponsorship into the Offside Line, because Barney needs to be at these games.
I need to be at these games. Yeah. I'm not sure what my wife would say if I said, I'm off to South Africa for a couple of days.
For God's sake, will someone please put some major sponsorship into the Offside Line so I can also go to these away games?
Yeah.
We could pod to you live from them.
I think the people demanding it, people desperately need it. They'd be furious if we're not podding from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So please bear that in, businesses. Right. And send some money our way and we'll big you up on this ever-growing popular podcast of ours. Excellent. Right, Barney.
Good
See you next week.
Good plugging. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Bye-bye.